Welcome to the Dear NICU Mama podcast. This podcast is a safe place to connect with other NICU moms by listening to interviews with trauma-informed medical and maternal mental health experts, remarkable stories from the NICU, and intentional roundtable conversations.
Our hope is that you feel like you're sitting across the table from another NICU sister and feel seen and validated in your experience. No matter where you are on your healing journey, this podcast is here to remind you that you are not alone. Welcome to the sisterhood.
Hello, hello. Happy Wednesday. Welcome back to the Dear NICU Mama podcast. We hope you had a wonderful long weekend. Aisha, how was your weekend?
It was awesome. It was a little overcast, but we had a lovely time just resting, having extra time with Andy. It was awesome. How about you?
It was very much the same. I got my feet and hands dirty in the garden, and I have never been happier in my life. And I purposely logged off and didn't really check emails or anything. So it was very nice. But I always feel like after those weekends, we should always have 3-day weekends. Yes. I don't know if you guys feel the way, but I'm like, absolutely. What's the point of a 2-day weekend? We need that extra day.
We do. I please, let's motion to get that approved by whoever needs to approve it, because it's just so quick.
I know. I completely hear you. Well, we have a very special and long-awaited episode to share with you guys today, and that is the story of the one and only Carrie and her sweet, sweet daughter, Hattie. This has truly been a long time coming. Carrie has been on the team now for a couple of years and has just a truly remarkable NICU story, but even more than that, just a life after NICU journey, too, that she shares so vulnerably. And if you've ever needed a shop assistant, Carrie has been the one to take care of you, and she does a fabulous job. So, Carrie, welcome to the podcast. We're so honored and excited to have you here.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be here with you guys.
So we've been wanting to hear your story. Mm-hmm. Carrie has been instantly, when I connected with you, I feel like it was an instant bond where I just felt so seen and validated. Mm-hmm. And we had a lot of common issues that we were both dealing with at the time. And it was just so incredible in my journey to just know that I had a Carrie to vent to, mm-hmm. or just send a quick message to. And so I'm really excited to have you and glad that you joined us today.
Thank you. You're so sweet. I felt the exact same way about you. It was so fun to bond over girl mom life and everything else.
Yes. Yes, for sure. Well, do you want to maybe start with the beginning? Let's go back to pre Hattie. What was your family vision? What were you hoping? And let's go from there.
Okay. So my husband, Alex, and I had been dating for 9 years before we got married. And it was all sort of quick after that. We got married 3 weeks after we decided we were getting married. And then
wait, what?
Yeah.
Wait, you got engaged and then got married 3 weeks later?
I mean, engaged is a generous term for what happened. I mean, we'd been together for 9 years and we were watching fireworks at my parents' lake house. And we were we should get married. And then we did. It was
I love
what's the quickest way to do this, but still have our family there. So got married 3 weeks later. That was fall of 2019. And then COVID happened in the spring. And that was around the time that we were we should have a baby.
With all this free time on our hands.
Then throw in some typical COVID stuff, new jobs, a move to a new city, all that kind of stuff. We were, we had just moved in with my in-laws while we were looking for our house and found out about Hattie. But
my goodness.
We had always kind of pictured ourselves with 3 kids. And then NICU life and plans changed.
Well, can we go a little bit back then to when you guys found out you were pregnant, you were living with your in-laws, and I'd love to know, was your pregnancy relatively, quote, normal? Was it considered high risk? I mean, what was your pregnancy journey leading up to Hattie's delivery?
Pretty easy. I mean, aside from
Yeah.
like nausea and vomiting all the time, like not high risk. There were no big
Sure.
concerns at all. I just felt terrible. We were so excited, and then I was so sick.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the first thing I ever threw up was coffee, and I used to own a
Oh,
coffee company,
no.
and I could not drink hot coffee for 3 years. Like, I just started being able to drink hot coffee
Oh
That
my
is
after
gosh.
pregnancy with
devastating.
Hattie. But, I mean, that was the biggest thing. Just I was sick for 7 out of 9 months. There was, like, a 2-month break in the
Oh,
middle, and then it came back at the end. But aside from
Well,
that,
oh my
everything was
gosh.
super easy.
Well, and it's something that we know about your kind of what you dreamed for your birth plan because we know you as a friend, but I'd love you to talk a little bit about, what did you envision your birth looking like and what was your dream and what did it actually look like when everything happened?
So before, I think it was even before we were married, I had this idea that I wanted to have a home birth. We had a close friend who had 3 home births. They all were like
Wow.
such crazy, amazing stories.
Yeah.
And she had told me about how like she just felt so at peace. She was in her home, she was with her husband. Like there were all these like crazy details to it, but like she was home. And
Mhm.
I knew that I wanted to have an all natural birth. We did so much prep. We took a hypnobirthing class. We were so invested. We were like, this is how
Mhm.
we're going to do it. We need to have all the tools. We need to have all the information. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
we hired a doula. We worked with her in our home after we moved into our own house. She would come and do prenatal sessions. She was incredible. So yeah, we were planning for this all natural, peaceful home birth. And
Mhm.
then it late in the game of planning that, like after the anatomy scan, like the 20-week anatomy scan, my husband was like, I'm not feeling super comfortable with a home birth. Can we
Mm.
look at other options? Let's find a compromise. So there's this amazing hospital system where we live, where they let you have a water birth in a hospital. Um,
Oh, yeah.
so you kind of get the best of both worlds. They're
Yeah.
super supportive of having doula support, and even in COVID times, although it wasn't peak COVID, it was summer of 2021.
Mhm.
Even with the restrictions that were still in place, they were allowing all those things to happen.
Mm.
So we ended up switching care providers at 28 weeks, so that we could
Oh.
have that option. Um,
Mhm.
Mm.
as we got closer and closer, Alex was like, I just want to have that extra security.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And
right.
there was no
So
reason other than he just had this, like, gut feeling,
Yep.
let's call it, of, like, let's
Yeah.
just
There were no complications at all. Like not a single one, the whole
mm.
journey. So it was just him, his like comfort level.
Mhm.
Right.
He kept saying, he was like, I just want to be safe. I want you to be safe. I want our
Yeah.
baby to be safe. I want to know that worst case scenario, we have everything we need where we are.
Mm. Mhm.
Right.
Well, we ended up,
Absolutely.
I was very hesitant and
Mhm.
very unwilling to do it for a while. And then I was like, this is just as much your decision as mine.
Mhm.
We're partners.
Mhm.
That's how we've approached everything for all these years. And
Mhm.
I can't feel as supported as I need to feel if you're nervous or scared or
Mhm.
having
Yeah.
all these
Right.
feelings. So
Yep.
Yeah.
that was the
Absolutely.
compromise we came to.
So then delivery comes
Delivery
and
comes.
walk us through everything.
Yeah. So I was 40 weeks and 2 days.
Oh my
And
goodness.
the night before, I just couldn't get comfortable from like 10 p.m. all throughout the night. I think I went to sleep around 10, slept for maybe 2 hours, and then I was like up just walking our hallways until 7 in the morning. um,
Mm.
and at the time, I did not realize that that's like back labor and a sign.
Mm.
But I woke up at 8 a.m. My husband was in the shower getting ready for work. And I woke up like in a panic. I was like, okay, either my water broke or it's going to break. And I like, okay, nothing's wet. Everything's fine. And then I like stood up and I was like, oh, I think I'm going to lose my mucus plug. Like nothing
Oh
had
my gosh.
happened. It was just this like, I knew it was happening.
Oh my gosh.
So I like start to walk down the hallway to the bathroom and lost my mucus plug. And I'm like banging on the door, like, let me in, something's happening. And then I was like, huh, this is weird. This isn't what I thought things would look like. So I texted a picture to my doula and I was like, is this what is supposed to happen? I was like, is this a mucus plug? And she was like, it's not pretty, but yep, that's what it is.
Also, why are they called the mucus plugs? I'm like,
it's so gross.
There's no other term. There's no other term.
There's like so many gross terms in pregnancy that you're like, I already feel like a huge whale right now. And now you're throwing all these like not awesome terms at me. Not great. So that was like 8:30. I'm on the phone with my doula. My husband's like, do I go to work? What do I do? Like, how do these things happen? And she was like, go to work. Like, there's no contractions. And this could take a really long time. Like, this could just be the beginning or it could happen, but like, go. He works like 3 minutes from our house. So he goes to work. I'm like, I'm just going to go on about my day. And it was summer. I was a teacher and didn't really have a lot to do. So I'm just kind of hanging out. And then this awful term, mucus plug, keeps coming out in like pieces. And I keep texting my doula and she finally calls me and she was like, so are you gonna swallow your pride and just put on the diaper? She was like, do you want to keep ruining underwear or just put on the diaper? I was like, all right, okay, fine. You've talked me into it. So it's like just before noon and I'm like, what are these ridiculous adult diapers that we bought for postpartum and now I have to wear before I have a baby? So I'm like, I should go to the bathroom. I go to the bathroom to put on a adult diaper and my water broke over the toilet, which was lucky.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
That was noon. And at the time it was like, it seemed very normal. Like I called my doula again. I called my husband. My doula was like, does it have a weird color or a weird smell? And it didn't at that point. So I was like, cool, this is what's happening. My husband came home for lunch and he was like, I'm not going to go back to work. Like, we're just going to ride this out and see what happens here. And then my providers, I was with a group of midwives, and their policy is if you test positive for group B strep, once your water breaks, you have to go in. And I had tested positive for group B strep. So I knew that I wasn't going to be able to labor at home the way I had planned to, but I was like, I'm going to like test this a little bit. Like, I'm going to eat a really good lunch and then we're going to go in.
Yeah.
So we did that. We like took our time. I think by the time we got to the hospital, it was like 2:30, 3 p.m. And we waited for a while because I was not really having contractions at that point, like very mild, but nothing that made me really uncomfortable. And there were a lot of other people that were much further along, but we were so like confident in the waiting room. There was like this woman who was like much further along in her labor, having a really like tough time through contractions, and she was all alone. And my husband was like supporting her and cheering her on and just super encouraging. Like, he was so sweet. He was just like oozing excitement the whole time. And, like, we're so confident. We're like, we've got this. We've got our playlist. We've got our like breathing exercises. We know which hypnobirthing scripts we like, which ones we don't. He knows when to stop talking and when to just be there.
Right.
We were so confident. So we finally get back to triage and they're like, what makes you think you're in labor? And I'm like, okay, people, well, my water broke and it's still leaking. And they were like, oh, okay, tell me about it. I'm like, also, it's like super misleading that they call it water because this doesn't look like water anymore. And she was like,
yeah.
tell me about that. And can I look? I was like, sure. Like, I'm already here. You're going to look at some point. Go for it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And they check and she's like, oh, that's meconium. And I'm like, okay, I know that word, but like, tell me more. She's like, yeah,
Mhm.
that basically means that like your baby pooped inside of you and that's what's coming out with your water now. And
Mm.
she was like, nothing major concerning there at this point. By the time we got back to triage, I was like starting to have some contractions, but still manageable. And they were like, okay, like we'll do your vitals, all the whole like classic triage steps.
Mhm.
Mm.
And then they come in, they're like, okay, we're going to do an ultrasound just to make sure baby's head down. Has baby been head down? And I'm like, yeah, I was just at the doctor the other day. They had to like go around her head to do the cervical check. Like everything's good. And the doctor that did the ultrasound was like, oh, your baby's breech. And
Mm.
we laughed, like thinking that they were joking with us because it had been not even 5 days since we had been at the doctor and knew she was head down. Um, they were not joking. It was
Mhm.
not a
Mm.
cruel joke. But then we're like thinking back and she had been super, super active like the last few days. And I could see her foot in like my rib cage. Um, so we were like, yeah, she's head down. But like her hands and her feet were in my rib cage. So
Mm.
Mhm.
she had flipped like within 5 days being born. Um, and my labor just kept progressing. And they were like,
Mm.
okay, well, this is a C-section, but it's not an emergency. You know, we have to wait because you ate lunch and you weren't supposed to do that. Yeah. You have to wait X amount of hours after someone's eaten to have a C-section. So that's what we're doing. Everything's fine. And so we just like, we're there. They were super great about letting our doula come back into triage, which is normally not the like hospital protocol.
Mhm.
But we learned a lot about advocating for ourselves
Mm.
through the classes that we took. And our doulas was amazing, is amazing.
Mm.
So she helped us to kind of like push for that
Mhm.
allowance.
Mhm.
So she came and she like turned out the lights and she hung twinkle lights and she like read some of the scripts for us and she helped me do some like positioning. We tried, you know, there's only so many things they could do because my water had already broken to try to reposition Hattie.
Mhm.
Uh, but we did some like hypnobirthing techniques and that kind of stuff to try to get like in the right mindset. Because for all of the prep that Alex and I did during pregnancy, this was just like we were so confident that we were going to have the birth that we had envisioned that we didn't plan for a C-section. Um,
Mhm.
So our doula, Allie, was walking us through some of the things and, you know, like, you can ask for this, you can ask for this. That probably won't happen, those types of things.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and then labor kept progressing and they come in and they're like, okay, we're going to take you back. We're getting you ready and we're going to take you back. And I was like, well, it's not the time. You told me I had so many hours. And they were like, this has escalated to emergent because
Mhm.
you're still leaking fluid. She's running out of fluid and your labor is progressing. So you are
Mm.
going to birth your baby.
Mm.
Mm.
So that was kind of when things got like scary, I guess.
Mhm.
Before that, we were disappointed and I was really struggling with the idea that it wasn't going to be the birth that I had prepared for.
Mhm.
We were so intentional about the team that we had chosen with switching care providers and our doula and the classes we took and all of those things that it was really a tough pill to swallow that things were not going to go as planned. Um,
Mhm.
but it wasn't until they were like, no, we need to do this now that I got really like scared. And I was having
Mhm.
a really hard time um, with the fact that they were going to take me into the operating room and Alex and our doula had to wait outside for a while. They did allow Alex to come in during her birth, but our doula was not allowed. And that was also really hard. because she spent so much time with us and knew me really well and what I would need in those moments. And also what Alex would need. A lot of what
Mhm.
she did was to support him too. So that
Mhm.
was a really hard part, but we were really lucky that we had the labor and delivery nurses that we did. There was one super sweet nurse who just held my hand and like played with my hair and talked
Aw.
me through every single thing that was going to happen before it was happening and while it was happening. Um, yeah. So that
Mm.
then Hattie was born at 8:52 p.m. on July 20th, 2021.
That is, yeah, that's definitely a lot to process in a very short amount of time, especially when you have, like, everything kind of planned out, and like you said, you were so confident, and I wonder, did you like, were you processing anything at all at that time?
There was some time um, from the time they told me that I was not going to have a vaginal birth. Um, there was some time to process a C-section.
Mhm.
And that was when
Mhm.
our doula was like back in triage with us and walking us through. She gave us a lot of information on what we should expect that to be like. And that was really helpful in processing um, as much as you can in a
Mhm.
situation like that. You know, you're
Mhm.
Mhm.
in labor and like just
Yeah.
yeah, there's not a lot of processing that happens, but she was really helpful in trying to like encourage that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And but the time from like this is happening now until Hattie was born, you're just
No.
doing it and
Mhm.
there's no other
Mhm.
choice but to do it.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a lot
Yeah.
of processing there.
Yeah.
Well, and this would technically be jumping ahead, so I apologize. But while we're on the topic of just birth specifically, I want to ask a question about I'm not super familiar with the natural birth community, but I'd love for you to elaborate on what I tend to see, like on social media, for example, where natural birth is really about like mind body connection and like your body was made to give birth, and like it's really like affirmative to your body's capability to have a baby. And, I'd love for you to share a little bit on, how you processed this probably was a lot long, far off after you had Hattie. But, you did this prep work to really prepare and like do that mind body connection. And then when that wasn't an option during that emergency section, like how did you kind of reconcile a little bit of that identity maybe, or just kind of like that healing process of I did this prep to connect with my mind and body. I wanted to have this experience, What did healing look like for you, and how did you maybe reconcile some of that you felt like you missed out on when it came to birth specifically?
That was really hard for me. I've always sort of identified as this like hippie naturalist type person.
Mhm.
And I really did like believe my body is made to do this. They're like,
Mhm.
I have done the mental work to make this happen the way it should.
Mm.
I hypnobirthing is might be too much, but
No.
hypnobirthing is essentially like self hypnosis. And it can
Mm.
really help to minimize the pain that you feel during labor and birth.
Sure.
And I had done a lot of work with that. I mean,
Mm.
from the time I found out I was pregnant until I was in the hospital, I was doing the exercises and the positioning physical exercises and the breathing exercises and the reading
Mhm.
and the scripts and all these, self-talk things that you learn when you're prepping for
Mhm.
a natural birth. Um,
Mhm. Sure.
so reconciling that wasn't going to happen for me felt like losing this big part of who I
Mm.
was. Like
Mhm.
I've always believed in modern medicine, but I wanted modern medicine to support me in a
Mm.
physiological natural instinctual birth.
Sure. Yeah.
And none of it was what I had planned for. And it was all very medical. I mean, when a natural hypnobirth turns into emergency surgery, it's just a completely opposite plan from what you've been hoping for. But more than that, it's really the prep that I was like, but we did everything we should have done. We've and more. So it took a lot to reconcile that. There a lot of therapy, and a lot of, I guess, getting myself into the mindset where I accept that my body didn't fail me. Sometimes things just don't go as planned, because for so long I was like, we're made to do this. Why couldn't I? And I know so many can relate to that in this community.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
But that was a really hard thing to accept, and truly just therapy and giving myself a lot of grace. And eventually I quit beating myself up over it.
Yeah. So good. Such a beautiful reminder. And also, you know, the reminder too that, and I'm sure this is something that you worked on in therapy too, of like all that prep was not wasted time, right? Like that prep work, that inner work that you did and that work you did with your husband was not wasted, right? Like that was still a time for you to get in touch with your body, connect with Alex, like really get yourself in the mindset of becoming a mom, but also that grief that comes with, oh, this was not how I planned this. Like you said, we did all the steps and yet my body did not fail. Like my body did the very best that it could. So thank you for sharing that.
So part of the like hypnobirthing work that you do is like you kind of identify or create like your own personal mantras that like help you through pregnancy and birth. And one of mine was like, I trust my baby and I trust my body. And so to be thinking that for 9 months and then to have this whole different experience, I was like, well, I can't trust my body. I can't trust myself at all. I don't know what I'm doing. So that was really hard for me. But my doula shared this like piece of wisdom, that there's this belief in the midwife and doula community that sometimes when babies flip and are breech that close to the end of pregnancy, that they're signaling that they need to be closer to the mother's heart because there's something wrong. And that has been like a super healing piece of wisdom for me, because with my personal mantra being, I trust my baby and I trust my body, and then feeling like I couldn't trust my body, when she shared that, I was like, but I can trust my baby. She knew before I knew. This was Hattie telling me there's something wrong. And that was like one of the most healing parts for me, to like allow myself to accept that while none of her birth and NICU stay are what we would have chosen, she chose this birth because she knew this was the way that we would find out all we found out about her and be able to save her and support her the ways that she needed.
That's so healing. And just like, what a way to, like you said, trust your baby. Like that was a part of your mantra. Like what a healing way to just phrase that whole experience for you and really just flip that narrative a little bit. I'm so grateful you had a voice like that, especially at such a tender time, to kind of pull you from that place and bring you to another place like that. And so I'd love to know then, coming from there, so you had the emergency C-section and then you're launched into this NICU world, and you've kind of hinted at it a couple times of like all the things we found out. So I'd love to know, you know, because the pregnancy was totally uncomplicated. And then we go to the NICU. And so what was it like what was your first moments in the NICU like, and what did you find with Hattie when she was born?
So we actually did not go directly to the NICU after her birth.
Oh, okay.
she was with us for 5 hours in, the postpartum wing. The,
Oh my goodness.
recovery bay and then postpartum. And I mean, like, in the OR, they did some of the, like, suction and that sort of thing, and the NICU team was in there because of the meconium.
Sure.
Um,
Mhm.
but they were like, "She's good. She's breathing. Everything's fine. You can go to recovery with your baby and then move up to postpartum." So we did all
Sure.
that. And it was in the postpartum wing when the nursery pediatrician came in to do the initial evaluation. She had like just put her little footprints on the card, um, all that. And she was listening to her and she was like, "Do you mind if I take her to the nursery for a minute? She's doing all of this bedside." And we were like, "No, what's going on?" She was like, "She just seems like she's working like a little harder to breathe. So gonna do a little bit more suction and we'll bring her right back." So she takes her down to the nursery. I'm like recovering from a C-section, feeling terrible. My husband's like on
Yeah.
an adrenaline high, super excited. It's like 1:30 in the morning. Uh, and she comes back in. Hattie's in an isolette, and there are like 6 people with her. And she was like, "We're
Mm,
going to the NICU." She was like,
mhm.
"She's not breathing well. She needs a lot more help than we can give her up here." Um, and she's like, "Dad, you can come. Mom, you have to stay."
Mm.
So Alex is like looking at me like for confirmation, like, "Do I go?" And I'm like, "Somebody needs to be with our baby. Like,
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
don't know why they're saying NICU. This baby was full term, but go see where they're
Mhm.
taking her." I was like
Mhm.
Right.
having a really
Yeah.
hard time comprehending that like my full term
Yeah.
baby was going to the NICU. It was
Mhm.
totally foreign idea to me.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So he goes with Hattie, and this swarm of doctors. And we had this really awesome nurse who Alex yelled at on his way out and said, "Don't you leave her side."
No.
While she has this whole room, like hallway full of patients. But she rarely left my side. She was incredible.
Oh.
Um, and they leave the room and she goes, "Okay, let's get you pumping." And I'm like, "I asked my doula if I needed to bring my pump. I didn't bring it." And she's like, "We have those here and we're going to pump." And so that's what I did all night, off and on. Alex was texting me and FaceTiming me and calling me as much as he could, and badgering every single person he came in contact with in the NICU, like, "What's happening now? What are you doing? Is she okay? Tell me more." That's not a good enough answer. Uh,
Mhm.
and I was alone in the postpartum room and trying to process, feeling terrible. They're telling me I can't go see her because I'm still recovering, and they're like, "You have to pee without a catheter, but we can't take your catheter out yet." And I'm so
Mm.
mad and so
Yeah.
confused and sad. Um, and yeah, the first person I told that Hattie was in the NICU, I texted my dad at like 4:30 in the morning because he's always been an early riser, and I was like, "I need somebody," and he's the only
Mhm.
person I know that might be awake.
Mhm.
Um, so he was my first like lifeline before I even got to the NICU. Um, and then later that next morning, they finally were like, "Okay, we can like hook your catheter bag up and you can be wheeled down." And I was like, "Oh, finally somebody take me to see my baby."
Right.
um, but I wasn't prepared to see her like that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
As I know no one's ever prepared to see their baby like that. Um,
Mhm.
she was intubated and in a little fish tank isolate. And
Mhm.
I was really unfamiliar with all of that. And I'm like, it like, is she crying? Like, is she okay? And they're like, "No, she's sedated. She's intubated. She can't do any of those things, but we're doing our best." And that was like sort of this term that they kept telling us, like, "We're doing our best." And it wasn't really sinking in like what they were telling us.
Mhm.
And finally, like this really kind doctor was like, she aspirated on meconium. It's in her lungs. It's really severe, and we don't we don't have a lot of information to give you. Like, we will do everything we can, but we can't tell you, yes, she will be okay, or no, she will not be okay. And Alex asked every single person, she's coming home, right? Like, she's going to be okay. Tell me black and white, what's going on? And as I'm sure you both know, there's not a lot of those answers.
Oh my goodness, Carrie. I can't even imagine just the whiplash of that whole, like, what is this, like, within 48 hours or 24 hours? How, I don't think I realized how condensed all of that was.
It's a lot of back and forth.
It's a lot. It is so much. And I just want to say sorry that all had to be part of the story of Hattie and yours and Alex, and also just say how incredibly lucky Hattie is to be in a family that is so loving. I hear in the midst of it all just the support and the love coming from both of you to each other, to Hattie, and she truly is the luckiest to have you and Alex as her parents.
Thank you.
So just wanted to say that because that is a crazy beginning, and somehow through it all, I felt so much love in it too.
There's definitely that. Yeah. We there's nothing like being thrown into the NICU. There's nothing that can prepare you for what it feels like and how you are just thrown all this information, and you this like perfect newborn snuggly recovery that you imagine, and then you can't even hold your baby for days, and they're hooked up to wires and machines and all of this. There's no preparing you for that. But having the right people or the right person that you're doing it with makes a huge difference. I mean, I think all I did for the whole time we were in the hospital, I was in the hospital for 4 days after Hattie was born. And we spent as much time as we could in the NICU. And then they would always call down and be like, she's missing her meds. She needs to come up here. So we go back out, and every moment that I was away from her, I just sobbed. Just that's all I did. And my husband, incredible, and like the most positive, optimistic person you'll ever meet. And it sometimes drives me bananas, but it was exactly what I needed in those days. And like the second day in the NICU, and I was sobbing, and he was like, we're going to celebrate every single tiny win. He was like, you got your catheter out. That's incredible. Like, making this huge deal out of something that's like just like so vulnerable. And then he's like,
it's like the mucus plug.
Yeah, like the mucus.
Such a hype man. And he truly like made sure that we celebrated every single thing. Like, we read her first book. We got to hold her. We got to touch her. They took one of those sandbags away. Like, every little thing. But we made that promise to each other on like her second day of life. And it's something that we've really committed to doing for all of her life. I mean, we celebrate everything she does because she almost didn't get to do it.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, it's hard to condense like a NICU journey into like, here's 5 minutes of like this super long and hard journey of our lives. But I wonder if you could touch a little bit on, after she was extubated, what were they finding, and, what did kind of the valleys and mountains of her NICU journey look like before you guys were able to come home?
Yeah. So after she was extubated, she was on CPAP for a while, and then, nasal cannula, all those things. And really her biggest struggle for the first 2 weeks was that she wasn't tolerating room air. So she would trial room air and fail and trial room air and fail. And it was a lot of back and forth of that. And she had an NG tube until she was like 13 days old. So feeding was another one of her big challenges. But I think it was like the third or fourth time that they trialed room air and she failed. That they were like, we're just going to do like a pulmonary echocardiogram to see if there's anything going on with the lungs that's preventing her from being able to do this, because the meconium's cleared and the meconium had turned into pneumonia and we've treated that and that's cleared and she should be able to breathe right now. So they did that, the pulmonary echo. And the doctor came in, and she was like, so we didn't find anything wrong with her lungs. It was great. Everything looks good. We're like, okay, great. And then she was like, but she does have a heart condition. And she was asking us like about our family heart health and all this, the history. And if either one of us had heart issues. And I'm like, there's heart issues in my family, but like, what's hers? And she's, they told us that she has a coarctation of the aorta, and she has aortic and mitral valve stenosis, and she has like this little issue with her left lower heart chamber, or her lower heart chamber. But her main issue is the coarctation, and neither one of us had ever heard of that, and so we're like, okay, my family has X, Y, and Z heart issues, but not that. So tell us what's going on. Yeah. They're like, well, we're transferring you. We were at a level 3 NICU, a smaller one, and they were transferring us to a level 4. And they're like, so when you transfer, you'll get a lot more information. You'll meet with like a cardiologist who will be there around the clock if you need if she needs any sort of support, and they can answer all your questions. And she's 2 weeks old at this point. So we ended up switching to another hospital, which was amazing. It's where we go for all of our follow-ups and things. And we got to have like our own room there. And really, once she got there, she started making a lot of leaps. The next day was like the first day we had a successful breastfeeding session, which had been like really, really important to me. It was one of like my main goals during pregnancy was to be able to successfully breastfeed. And when everything else that I had been prepping and planning for had kind of gone out the window, I was like, I will make this happen. I don't know what I need to do, but whatever it takes, I will make this happen. So we were finally able to do that successfully. She got the NG tube out, and this really sweet older nurse who was there one day, and Hattie was like notorious for ripping her nasal cannula out. So this older NICU nurse at the hospital we were transferred to, she was like, we get there one day and she doesn't really have it in. She was like, oh yeah. She's like, well, she can breathe without that thing. She keeps sticking it out on her own. She was like, I trust her. She can do this. She's like, I'm watching her. I don't have that many patients right now. I'm going to watch her. And they were like, just like dial it down to this. And she was like, I dialed it down to nothing. It's a placebo.
It's a placebo.
So then she was able to fully come off oxygen, was doing great. And the cardiologist came in and he was like, just the one that was on rounds while we were there. And he was like, I'm here to go over things with you. You've been assigned to this cardiologist. Have you met with her? And you're like, no, you're the first person we met. And he was like, that's not going to work. You need to know your cardiologist. You will be working with this person for your child's lifetime. Like, you're my patient now. And he walked us through everything that we needed to know about her heart condition. He told us that he felt like at this point, that was the only thing that was keeping her in the NICU, was that she had this heart condition that they were monitoring. And he was like, this is not something that's going to change overnight. And it's not something that I think we need to intervene with right now. And if this is all that's keeping you here, I will advocate for you guys to go home. And that was day 18. He told the NICU team that we should be discharged. They decided that they thought we should stay for another day, at least. So we're there on day 19, and he's like rounding. He walks by our room and sees us, and he was like, "What are you guys doing?" And I walked by. The NICU team said we had to stay longer. And he was like, "No, she is only being held here for a cardio reason. I am the cardiologist. You're going home today." And then we left an hour later. Day 19, she
Wow.
was discharged and finally got to come home.
Thank goodness for the doctors and nurses who just took it upon themselves to like put us under their wings. And
Yeah, it's so special when you find those doctors and nurses that not only take care of your baby, but take care of you too. Such an important part of NICU life and after NICU life.
So since you were sent home, how was that? Were you guys like, yes, let's go, we're home? Was it, we're terrified, now we don't have like this support system like 24/7? How was that going home and the days after?
We were so excited to go home, and then we got home and we were so anxious. Like both of us were incredibly anxious. And I think a lot of our parenting decisions were made out of fear after the NICU. We saw how hard she had to fight to be part of our lives, and we were so fearful that we wouldn't get to have all the years with her that we'd always dreamed of having with her. So every little thing made us anxious and fearful, and we made a lot of decisions because of that. It doesn't go as planned ever, but I think the NICU kind of exacerbates some of those things.
Yeah. It's like a crash course on like life will never go how you expect it to go.
Yes, it is.
Well, I relate a lot with this part of your story, just because, we've been able to connect a lot throughout the years of just that anxiety and the feeling of just not being able to really take a real deep breath or exhale, because you're kind of always on alert in the hypervigilance. But I totally relate to just the decision making out of fear. And I was wondering, how have you come to recognize that, and how have you been able to heal?
Again, therapy. I cannot downplay enough how important that has been for me. But again, going back to the "I trust my baby" mantra, it took me a little while, but I've been lucky enough that I've gotten to stay home with Hattie since she came home from the NICU. I didn't go back to work after she came home. And I feel really lucky that I know her so intimately, and I trust her. I know her. I know when she's going to be sick the next day. I feel like I like all those little tells in our kids that other people might miss. I think, especially after NICU life, you just become so aware of who they are and what their needs are. And I really, instead of, I think that can sometimes be like flipped, where it's like, oh, they're like a helicopter parent. I sort of seen it as a gift that I know her so deeply and I know her so intimately, and I can trust her because I trust that she will give me some sort of sign if she needs something that we're not doing, or there's something that we need to prepare for or face as a family.
I I love that so much. I think that that's so true. I think a lot of the times we think like, I hear a lot in like the Facebook group, like this general fear of what if I don't catch it? What if I miss something? But I think how you just phrased it right now, like our kids are capable of letting us know through their own way. And so I think that that's a beautiful reminder to anyone who's feeling any sort of anxiety of like, what if I miss it? You know, I love that. We should all adopt the trust your baby mantra.
I sometimes relate the right on time mantra too. That, we all as moms have fear and guilt and all these things. Like, what if I missed this? What if I didn't do this in time? And for me, a lot of the time when I'm heading down one of those spirals, I have to remind myself of all the times that we did catch it, or that we did see that she was getting sick and we took her in, or we saw that she was having trouble breathing and we advocated for that extra appointment or what have you. And I just keep reminding myself, like, we got it right on time. She was right on time. We got this right on time. All the solutions and resolutions will be right on time.
Yeah. No. So good. And I think too, being like in the NICU or like medical mom community, I think like there's this, well, if I parent without fear, then that makes me a good parent, right? But I think like as NICU parents, as medical parents, fear is just going to be a part of our motherhood story for a season. And especially right away, right? Because there's so much that we don't know. We're thrown into this world. So we're really not given an option to parent without that fear, right? That's just a part of it. It's just embedded in our motherhood story.
Yeah.
But with time, as you get to know your baby, as you establish those safe routines with a therapist, with a pediatrician to better understand the signs, like there are people there to support you and to give you the tools to catch those signs. And with time, it's less fear and it's more of that intuition, like you mentioned. And so to really affirm those moms too that are like, oh, I just wish I couldn't be scared. Like it's okay if you are a little scared right now. Like that's going to be a part of your story for a season. But we also believe that in time, it will be a little less scary and you'll feel that intuition and that courage because that also lives in you. Right now, fear feels like the loudest thing. It is like, all I feel is scared. All I feel is anxious. But just like our collection says, courage lives in you. Like, fear isn't the loudest voice here. It may sometimes feel like that. But there's that like quote that's like, what is it? Even in the face of fear, you're brave or something. I don't know. There's like this famous quote. You guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
Courage is not the absence of fear. It's doing it afraid.
Yes.
Yeah.
Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting in spite of fear. And so sometimes it feels like fear is the loudest voice. Yeah. And that's what we label ourselves at is I am an anxious, scared, fearful mom. But that's not the loudest voice here. Courage lives in you. Courage is acting even when it feels like all you are is scared. It's that courage that comes out the loudest. And so to the moms feeling that initially, know that in time, it will become more and more second nature and that intuition will build and that you are not any less of a mom for feeling that fear and anxiety. And so I think that's just such a beautiful point, Carrie, to reiterate of, because that's so how we feel in those first moments of just like, and you're given so many questions to answer that you're like, I don't know, like,
right.
I'm going to make the wrong one. Like, I don't know what this word means or if we should be going home or stay the extra day or you know what I mean?
No, you're meeting this like brand new person and learning this person. And then on top of that, you're being thrown all this like medical terminology that you probably have never heard before or don't know. And you're learning that and you're recovering from birth, whether it be vaginal or C-section, and you're on a bunch of drugs. Just so many things and everything is scary. But I think eventually that fear can become your friend too.
Absolutely. So much truth in that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how, but we're already at an hour. And I would just love to talk to you for like 4 hours.
I know.
But I do definitely think that a part 2 is necessary because Carrie has another baby later. And it's a redemption, really, in a lot of ways. But that redemption didn't come without some valleys and some just challenges along the way. And as so many of us in the NICU know, our NICU journeys don't end after the NICU. Oftentimes, we always call it like a new chapter is written and a new chapter begins. And so I think to come back for part 2 to talk about life at home with Hattie, and then 2, how you guys began to prep yourselves for another baby. I know it was kind of a surprise.
It was. Birth control does not always work.
But no, Carrie, we just can't thank you enough for sharing your story. And as your friends and fellow Dear NICU Mama team, like, it's just such an honor to hear the more intricate details of your story and to just see that how she's thriving now and just being this beautiful big sister is just hearing the backstory makes it even sweeter and even more remarkable. And so thank you for sharing your story. And I'm really looking forward to part 2. And I just want to affirm too, you mentioned how it just made no sense as a full-term mom to be in the NICU. And so to any of our full-term NICU moms who have felt out of place or what am I doing here? This is not what I expected. I'd love to end on how you would address other full-term NICU mamas listening and what words of hope you would offer them.
I just want to say that there's space for you here and we're with you. We have walked these halls and we'll walk this journey with you. But I also would like to tell you that it doesn't matter that your grandparents' neighbor's daughter had a baby that had it worse than you did. Your story.
She's using quotation hands. If you don't see the video, but there's big quotation hands.
Your story matters, and there's space for you to share it here if you can't find another space.
Yeah. So good. Beautiful. Well, you embody that message so well, Carrie, and you always build and make space for other full-term NICU moms and preemie moms like ourselves. Like, you really do that so beautifully. And so we love you, and I can't wait for part 2 now.
I love you guys. Thank you so much for giving us all a space that we can be vulnerable and just support each other. It's a beautiful, beautiful sisterhood to be part of.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, mamas, we are so grateful for this sisterhood and this community. We'll be back next week for part 2 if we can schedule it with all of our motherhood schedule. But it's always a joy to connect with you here on the podcast, and we'd love to hear if you listen. So feel free to send us an email or send us an Instagram message or start a thread in the Facebook group, but we'd love to connect with you after the episode as well. So there's ways to connect with us in the show notes, but until next week, have a good day. Thank you so much for listening to the Dear NICU Mama podcast. If you loved this episode, we'd be so grateful for a review.
For more ways to connect with the Dear NICU Mama sisterhood, check out the links in the episode description.